I think I found your brother's dog tag. Ray Morrison stared at the computer screen, his 73-year-old hands trembling over the keyboard. The email was from Vietnam, a country that had haunted his dreams for 50 years, a country where his brother Tommy had vanished without a trace. For half a century, Ray had carried Tommy's promise in his pocket, a worn dog tag and the words that still echoed in his mind. If you hold on to this, I'll always find my way home. But what happens when a promise becomes an obsession? When hope becomes the only thing keeping you alive? This is the story of two brothers, a war that tore them apart, and a search that lasted 5 decades. What Ray discovered in that small Vietnamese village will change everything you think you know about courage, sacrifice, and the promises we make to the people we love. Before we dive deeper into Ray's incredible journey, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this story ends, and the shocking discovery that brought a hero home after 50 years. The Morrison brothers grew up in Millfield, Texas, population 847, where dreams were as scarce as rain. Ray was the serious one, always looking out for Tommy, the wild card who could make anyone laugh or worry, sometimes both at once. When Ray's draft notice came in 1966, their father Jack, a World War II veteran who kept his medals hidden, sat him down at their kitchen table. "War's different now, son. You watch out for yourself." But Ray wasn't thinking about himself. He was thinking about Tommy, still in high school, still believing the world was full of adventures. The night before Ray left for basic training, the brothers sat on their father's truck tailgate, watching stars appear in the vast Texas sky. "You scared?" Tommy asked. "Terrified. When I graduate, I'm coming too." "Tommy, no. We're brothers, Ray. We stick together. That's what brothers do." Ray saw that stubborn look, the same one Tommy wore when he'd tried out for varsity football at 140 pounds, or when he'd stood up to bullies twice his size. There was no arguing with that look. "Promise me something," Ray said finally. "Anything. Promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you won't try to be a hero." Tommy grinned. "Can't promise that, brother, but I can promise I'll come home." 18 months later, Ray came home on leave wearing dress blues and carrying invisible scars. Tommy had graduated and was counting days until his 18th birthday. "Tell me about Vietnam," Tommy said one evening. Ray looked at his brother's eager face. "It's not what you think it is." "Then tell me what it is." Ray stared at the sunset bleeding across the Texas sky. "It's a place where good men die for strangers, and sometimes the strangers die anyway." Tommy's eyes lit up. "But you saved people, right? You made a difference?" Ray's silence was answer enough. On Tommy's 18th birthday, Ray found him at the kitchen table with enlistment papers. "I already signed them," Tommy said. "I ship out next month." That night, Tommy gave Ray the dog tags, 2 identical pieces of metal that would bind them across time and tragedy. "There's 2, Tommy said, pressing one into Ray's palm. "You keep this. If you hold on to it, I'll always find my way home." "Promise me," Tommy interrupted when Ray tried to speak. "Promise you'll never give up on me." Ray looked into his brother's eyes and made the promise that would define his life. "I'll always come for you, no matter what." The next morning, Ray stood on the platform watching Tommy's train disappear into the Texas dawn, the dog tag burning like a coal in his pocket. He had no idea it would be the last time he'd see his brother alive. Vietnam, March 1969. Ray was on his second tour, a sergeant now, hardened by 18 months of combat and loss. He'd learned to sleep through mortar attacks, to eat sea rations without tasting them, to write letters home that said nothing about the reality of war. Firebase Charlie sat on a hill overlooking the Mekong Delta, a collection of sandbags and razor wire that represented the thin line between civilization and chaos. Ray had been there for 3 months when word came that a new unit was arriving, fresh troops from the States, including his brother's company. The helicopter appeared as a speck on the horizon, growing larger until Ray could make out individual figures in the doorway. When Tommy stepped off that bird, Ray barely recognized him. The boy who'd left Texas with stars in his eyes now moved like a soldier, cautious, alert, already changed by the basic training and advanced infantry school that had transformed him from a hardware store clerk into a warrior. "Jesus, Ray," Tommy said when they finally had a moment alone. "This place is nothing like I imagined." Ray looked at his little brother, seeing the fear Tommy was trying so hard to hide. "What did you imagine?" "I don't know. Something more heroic, I guess. Like the movies." Ray almost laughed, but there was nothing funny about it. "The movies don't show you the smell, Tommy. They don't show you what it's like to lose friends. They don't show you what it's like to be scared every single day." "You ever get scared out here?" Tommy asked, his voice barely audible over the distant artillery. Ray looked at his little brother, still trying to be brave, still trying to impress his older sibling. "All the time. Don't let anyone fool you." For 3 weeks, Ray watched over Tommy like a guardian angel. He made sure his brother got the safer patrols, the easier assignments. He shared his hard-won knowledge about staying alive in a place designed to kill you. Tommy was a good soldier, better than good. He was brave without being reckless, smart without being cocky. The other men in his unit looked up to him, and Ray felt a pride that was mixed with terror. Pride because Tommy was everything a soldier should be. Terror because brave soldiers died just as easily as cowards. Ray thought he could protect him. He was wrong. March 23rd, 1969. The day started like any other, hot, humid, filled with the constant tension that came from knowing the enemy could be anywhere. Ray's squad was providing overwatch for a patrol moving through a village outside Pleiku, a routine operation that should have been simple. The first shots came from the tree line, sharp cracks that sent everyone diving for cover. Ray pressed himself against a low wall, his rifle ready, his eyes scanning for targets. Through his scope, he could see muzzle flashes in the jungle, enemy soldiers moving through the undergrowth. That's when he saw the boy. A Vietnamese child, no more than 8 years old, was trapped in the middle of the firefight, crying in terror as bullets whined overhead. He'd been playing in the village square when the shooting started, and now he was frozen with fear, too scared to move. Ray was about to call for covering fire when he saw a familiar figure break from cover. Tommy, brave, reckless Tommy, broke rank and sprinted across open ground toward the child. "Stay down!" Ray screamed, but his brother was already running. Time slowed to a crawl. Ray watched through his scope as Tommy reached the boy, scooped him up in his arms, and carried him toward the safety of a concrete wall. The child was crying, clinging to Tommy like a lifeline. But Tommy wasn't done. As he set the boy down behind cover, he saw a wounded American soldier lying in the open, blood spreading from a leg wound. Without hesitation, Tommy ran back into the killing zone. That's when the mortar round hit. The explosion was deafening, a flash of light and heat that turned the world white for a moment. When Ray's vision cleared, he could see smoke rising from a crater where Tommy had been standing. Ray was moving before he realized it, running toward the impact site, screaming his brother's name. Other soldiers were shouting, calling for a medic, returning fire at the tree line. But all Ray could hear was the ringing in his ears and the sound of his own voice calling for Tommy. When the smoke cleared, the Vietnamese boy was safe behind the wall, unhurt. The wounded American soldier was alive, already being treated by a medic. But Tommy Morrison had vanished. Ray searched until his hands were bloody and his voice was gone. He found a scrap of Tommy's uniform, torn and blood-stained. He found footprints in the mud leading toward the village. But he found no body, no dog tag, no trace of his brother. The official report was brief and brutal. Private Thomas Morrison, missing in action. Body not recovered. Ray refused to accept it. He organized search parties, questioned villagers, followed every lead no matter how slim. For 2 weeks he turned that area upside down, looking for any sign of Tommy. Finally, his commanding officer pulled him aside. "Ray, you need to let this go. Your brother's gone." "We don't know that. We haven't found a body." "Son, that mortar round hit dead center. There might not be enough left to find." Ray wanted to argue, wanted to keep searching, wanted to tear apart every building in that village until he found his brother. But he was a soldier, and soldiers followed orders. 3 days later, he was on a transport plane heading home. Tommy's dog tag burning in his pocket like an accusation. The flight home was the longest 18 hours of Ray's life. He sat in a window seat, staring down at the clouds, trying to figure out how he was going to tell his parents that he'd failed to keep his promise. The homecoming was everything he'd dreaded. His mother collapsed when she saw him walk through the door alone. His father just nodded once, like he'd been expecting this news his whole life. "We got the telegram," his father said quietly. "Missing in action." "I'm going back," Ray said. "As soon as I can. I'm going back to find him." His father looked at him with eyes that had seen too much war, too much loss. "Son, sometimes the dead don't want to be found." But Ray couldn't accept that. He'd made a promise, and promises were sacred things in the Morrison family. 1972. Ray sat across from Colonel Matthews at Fort Sam Houston, a stack of files between them. "Sergeant Morrison, we've been through this. Your brother is presumed KIA. Case closed. You haven't found a body. That mortar round, then show me the crater. Show me the evidence. Show me something other than paperwork." The colonel's face hardened. "Son, you need to accept reality." Ray leaned forward. "Reality is I made a promise. Reality is Tommy Morrison deserves better than presumed dead." He walked out with nothing but another form letter. Ray tried to build a normal life. He married Sarah, a nurse who understood nightmares. They had Jennifer and Michael, beautiful children who carried Tommy's smile in their eyes. Ray's garage became a war room. Maps covered the walls. Filing cabinets held thousands of letters. Sarah would find him there at midnight, hunched over documents, chasing ghosts. "You know he's gone," she said one night, her voice gentle but firm. Ray held up a letter from another MIA family. This mother found her son after 20 years. 20 years, Sarah. "Ray, I made him a promise." His voice cracked. "The last thing I said to my brother was, 'I'll always come for you.' How do I break that promise?" Sarah had no answer. Some promises were too sacred to abandon. Ray looked at his grandson, seeing Tommy's curiosity in the boy's eyes. "Because a promise is forever, Daniel. That's what makes us human, keeping faith when it seems impossible." By 2019, Ray was 73, most of his war buddies gone, his family worried about his obsession, but he couldn't let go. Every time he considered it, he'd remember Tommy's trust, that dog tag pressed into his palm. Then everything changed. Every Memorial Day, Ray would drive to Washington, D.C., making the pilgrimage to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. He'd find Tommy's name etched in black granite, panel 26W, line 21, and place his hand over the letters. "I'm still looking, brother," he'd whisper. "I'm still looking." The years turned into decades. Ray's children grew up, went to college, started families of their own. His grandson Daniel was particularly close to him, a quiet boy who loved to hear stories about Uncle Tommy, the hero he'd never met. "Why don't you just accept that he's gone, Grandpa?" Daniel asked one day when he was 12, finding Ray in the garage sorting through old documents. Ray looked at his grandson, seeing Tommy's curiosity in the boy's eyes. "Because a promise is forever, Daniel. That's what makes us human, our ability to keep faith even when it seems impossible." By 2010, Ray was in his 70s, his hair white, his back bent from years of carrying the weight of an unfulfilled promise. His friends from the war had started dying off, taking their memories with them. His family worried about his obsession, his inability to let go. But Ray couldn't let go. He'd tried. God knows he'd tried. But every time he thought about giving up, he'd remember Tommy's face that last night in Texas. The trust in his eyes when he'd pressed that dog tag into Ray's palm. Then, in the spring of 2019, 50 years after Tommy disappeared, everything changed. Ray was in his study, reading through old files for the 1,000th time, when his computer chimed with a new email. The sender's name was unfamiliar, Tran Nguyen, and the subject line made Ray's heart skip a beat. "About your brother, Thomas Morrison." With trembling fingers, Ray opened the message. "Dear Mr. Morrison, I hope this email finds you well. My name is Tran Nguyen, and I live in a village near Pleiku, Vietnam. 50 years ago, when I was a young boy, an American soldier saved my life during a battle. He carried me to safety, then went back to help others. I never forgot his kindness. My family has kept his dog tag all these years, hoping someday we could return it to his family. A friend who speaks English helped me search for you on the internet. I believe the soldier who saved me was your brother. If you would like, I can send you his tag and a letter he wrote. We have been waiting 50 years to say thank you." Ray read the email 3 times before the words sank in. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely type a response. "Yes," he wrote. "Please. I've been looking for him for 50 years." The week that followed was the longest of Ray's life. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't think about anything except that email and what it might mean. Sarah watched him pace the house like a caged animal, wearing a path in the carpet between the kitchen and his study. "What if it's not him?" she asked gently. "What if it's just someone with the same name?" "It's him," Ray said with absolute certainty. "I can feel it." When Tran's package arrived, Ray's hands shook so badly that Sarah had to help him open it. Inside was a small wooden box, carefully wrapped in silk. And inside that box was Tommy's missing dog tag, dulled by 50 years, but unmistakably his. Beneath the tag was a letter, written on rice paper in Tommy's familiar handwriting. "If anyone finds this, please tell my family I love them. I tried to do the right thing. I tried to help people. I hope that counts for something. Tell Ray I remembered our promise. I found my way home. Just not the way we expected. Take care of each other. Love, Tommy." Ray collapsed into his chair, the letter clutched to his chest, tears streaming down his face. For 50 years, he'd wondered what had happened to his brother in those final moments. Now he knew. But the story wasn't over. Tran's next email contained photographs, pictures of a small shrine in the village center, where Tommy's name was carved in both English and Vietnamese. The villagers had never forgotten the American soldier who'd saved their children. "We have ceremony every year," Tran wrote. "We honor the brave soldier who gave his life for strangers. Your brother is hero to many people." Within a week, Ray was on a plane to Vietnam, accompanied by his grandson Daniel and a documentary crew that had heard about his story. The country that had haunted his nightmares for 50 years was now his destination of hope. The flight to Ho Chi Minh City was emotional for Ray in ways he hadn't expected. Looking down at the green landscape below, he could see the Vietnam of his memories. Dense jungle, winding rivers, villages connected by narrow roads. But he could also see something else. A country at peace. A people who had moved beyond war. The drive to Pleiku took them through countryside that was both familiar and foreign. Ray recognized the terrain from his military days, but everything else had changed. Where once there had been fire bases and landing zones, now there were rice paddies and small farms. Where once there had been the sound of helicopters and artillery, now there was only the peaceful noise of everyday life. In the small village where Tommy had died, Tran Nguyen waited under a banyan tree. He was an old man now, his hair white, his back bent with age. But when he saw Ray, his eyes lit up with recognition. "You have same eyes as your brother," Tran said in careful English. "I never forget those eyes." With trembling hands, Tran led Ray to the village shrine. It was a simple structure, built of local stone, surrounded by flowers and incense burners. And there, carved into the central stone, was Tommy's name in both English and Vietnamese characters. "Every year, on day he died, we have ceremony," Tran explained. "Children bring flowers. Old people tell stories. We never forget the American soldier who saved us." Ray knelt before the shrine, placing his hand on his brother's name. For 50 years, he'd imagined Tommy alone, forgotten, lost in an unmarked grave. Now he discovered that Tommy had never been alone at all. He'd been remembered, honored, loved by people who had never even known his full name. But Tran had one more surprise. He led Ray to a small cemetery behind the village, where a simple headstone marked an unmarked grave. The inscription was in Vietnamese, but Tran translated, "Unknown American soldier. Died saving others. Hero to our village." "We bury him with honors," Tran said quietly. "We wait 50 years for family to come." DNA tests were arranged through the American embassy. The results came back 2 weeks later, confirming what Ray's heart had already known. The remains in that village cemetery belonged to Tommy Morrison. The process of bringing Tommy home was complicated, involving both governments, military protocols, and a mountain of paperwork. But Ray didn't care about the bureaucracy. After 50 years, he was finally going to keep his promise. The repatriation ceremony in Vietnam was small, but meaningful. Vietnamese officials, American embassy staff, and the entire village gathered to honor Tommy's sacrifice and witness his journey home. Tran spoke about the boy who had been saved, now a grandfather himself. The village elder read a poem about courage and sacrifice. Ray placed a Texas flag on Tommy's casket, next to the Vietnamese flowers that had been left by grateful villagers. The flight home was different from Ray's first journey back from Vietnam 50 years earlier. This time, he wasn't alone. This time, he was bringing his brother home. The funeral in Texas drew veterans from 3 states. As the honor guard carried Tommy's flag-draped casket, an old sergeant stepped forward. "Tommy Morrison saved my squad in '69, he said, voice breaking. "Pulled us out of an ambush. I never knew what happened to him." Another veteran nodded. "He covered our retreat at Firebase Delta. Kid had more guts than sense." One by one, they shared stories Ray had never heard. Moments when Tommy's courage had rippled through time, touching lives Ray never knew existed. The young soldier presenting the flag to Ray couldn't have been older than Tommy when he died. "On behalf of a grateful nation," he said, "please accept this flag as a symbol of our appreciation for your brother's honorable and faithful service." Ray accepted it, feeling the weight of 50 years lifting from his shoulders. At the graveside, Tommy's headstone waited, simple black granite inscribed with his name, rank, and one final line Ray had added. He kept his promise. Ray knelt and placed both dog tags on the stone, the one he'd carried for 50 years and the one returned from Vietnam. "Promise kept, Tommy," he whispered. "You're home." The wind caught the American flag above Tommy's grave, snapping it open against the darkening sky. For just a moment, Ray could swear he heard his brother's voice. "Thanks for never giving up on me." Daniel stood beside his grandfather, tears streaming down his face. "Grandpa, why did you search so long?" Ray looked at his grandson, seeing the future in the boy's eyes. "Because some promises are bigger than death, Daniel. Some bonds are stronger than time." In the months that followed, Ray's story inspired families worldwide. A scholarship fund was established in Tommy's name. The Vietnamese village became a pilgrimage site for other families seeking closure. Ray lived 5 more peaceful years, finally free from the weight of his unfulfilled promise. When he died at 78, he was buried beside Tommy, the brothers finally reunited. At Ray's funeral, Daniel read from his grandfather's final letter. The real hero was Tommy, who gave his life for strangers. "I just did what brothers do. I never gave up on family." Be one of those people who keeps faith when it seems impossible. When you make a promise, honor it no matter the cost. That's what makes us human. Some promises are bigger than death. Some bonds are stronger than time. Tommy Morrison kept his promise by saving lives, even when it cost him his own. Ray Morrison kept his promise by never stopping his search, no matter how hopeless it seemed. In a world that often forgets its heroes, this story reminds us that courage isn't just about what you do in battle. It's about what you do in the decades that follow. It's about keeping faith when everyone else has given up. It's about honoring the fallen by never letting them be forgotten. Ray Morrison searched for 50 years because he understood something that our modern world often forgets. A promise is sacred. When we give our word to someone we love, that word becomes part of who we are. Breaking it breaks us. Keeping it makes us whole. The village in Vietnam that honored Tommy's memory for 5 decades understood this too. They knew that heroism isn't just about the moment of sacrifice. It's about the generations that follow, the children who grow up hearing stories of courage, the communities that choose to remember rather than forget. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone who deserves to be remembered, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to This Really Happened, because some stories are too important to let fade away. And remember, in a world full of broken promises, be someone who keeps their word. When you love someone, love them forever. When you make a commitment, honor it no matter what it costs. Because sometimes, the greatest courage isn't charging into battle. Sometimes, It's never giving up on the people we love, even when the whole world tells us to let go. A promise can outlast a war. Sometimes, the greatest courage is never letting go.